Okay, I'm here with Valerie Weyland, and we've been talking a bit, and I had a question came up. How do we heal the world? Valerie, we've been talking, trying to figure things out, talking about Palestine and Israel and racism and indigenous cultures and trauma. And do you have some thoughts on that? How to help heal the world? How do we do that?
Yeah, that's a huge question.
Yeah.
And the best way for me to answer it is sort of to reflect on my own journey through life and how I've been able to nurture the evolving needs of our communities and how we transform the world, not just heal it, but transform it into a space where we are all thriving and we're experiencing the abundance of life itself. And for me, it really came back to like looking at myself and becoming like what I needed to heal, right? So it started with my own inner healing. And so I really, at the end of the day, needed love.
Hmm.
I needed to be the love that would heal the brokenness within, the trauma and all of the sadness and pain that I experienced. There was nothing that anyone outside of me could do. Um, and so I became the image of love. And through my journey through life, I realized that you cannot transform the world without transforming yourself first.
Right.
So, how do we heal the world? By looking at our own inner wounds
Hmm.
and beginning the process of slowly nurturing them. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that, like, when we look at the atrocities happening around the world, it feels so heavy and overwhelming. But if we can look at ourselves first and
Yeah.
look at the own atrocities that have happened within ourselves.
Right. But
Then,
but we were talking before, like there's
yeah,
this problem of you can't focus, you have to look at the trauma,
yeah,
but you also can't dwell on it. I mean, a lot of therapy is looking at the trauma and talking about it, but you were saying, well, I don't want to speak for you, but how do you acknowledge your own wounds and yet
mm.
heal? How do you heal?
Well, you have to detach from identifying with your pain and your trauma. So
Mm,
if you are identified as the darkness that you're in or the darkness that you've inherited, it's there's really nowhere to go but back into darkness. And I can say that, as I shared with you before, Chris, through my own experience of loss
right.
and deep, deep pain. And that for me happened through stillness and meditation. I know that sounds so simplistic, and we're definitely, I think oftentimes we're looking for like a complex answer for a complex problem. But
Mm,
the more that I've stilled my own thoughts in my mind and just the noise, the more that I realize that I can be in this world, but not of it. You
mm,
know, I don't have to be my pain. I don't have to be my trauma. I can learn from it. It will help me grow. It'll help me emerge into um, a greater sense of being, but I'm not that singular moment in time.
right. Right.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of times though people take that a lot of people take that path, and I think the problem is they get disconnected. So like for example, you know, my background, I'm friends with a lot of people into Buddhism meditation, and they'll go off on retreats. It was to go off on a retreat, go off for a month, go off for a year, and you're disconnecting from everything. And you how do you connect back? You know, to be of the world but not of the world, but be in the world. How do you connect to the world?
Nature.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I was sharing with you before that I was the other day I was looking at the black red-tailed cockatoos
Yeah.
just above on this beautiful tree above our house, and they were busy eating all of the seeds, and they were dropping all over our pathway was covered with leaves and
Right.
seeds. And I think for some people they'd be so annoyed, but I was so fascinated and inspired by being in union with nature is that I felt called at that moment to pick up the seeds, which were on the cement, right? Which would have been dirt if us humans didn't like put cement there and block
Right,
re.
right,
I picked up the seeds and put them in dirt. And I think sometimes we're looking for like very direct answers. But I think if you just sense what's calling you forward to connect with nature and the cycle of life,
right,
um, then you are able to flow with what is. Sometimes the answers aren't immediate. You kind of have to be still enough to be able to observe when that opportunity emerges.
right.
Yeah.
And in some sense, everything's nature. So if it's a neighbor who needs help, that's
Yeah.
nature too. Their nature right there next to you, and a child laughing
Oh,
and
all of it. All
yeah,
of it. Our nature. Nature
yeah.
is we're
It's
all one.
we're all one, part of this, part of the universe, part of nature. It's interesting, as we were talking, that indigenous people know that. That's part of the wisdom of indigenous cultures. But scientists see this too. Like Einstein said, look deeply into nature and you'll understand everything better. And Einstein was just kind of drunk on a love for the universe and nature, which is what indigenous people experience too. And we need to get back to that, I guess.
Yeah, I completely agree. And
Yeah.
it starts um, holding space for indigenous people to share their
Yeah.
knowledge of the land,
Yes.
and practicing the art of deep listening. So
Yes.
not listening to affirm what you know, but listen for what you don't know. Like, where is our ignorance really?
Right.
Um, so, and I find, here in Western Australia, the traditional custodians of the land here are Noongar people, and they hold so much knowledge about the land and the
Right.
cycle of life. We were talking about the fires and just the way that they
Right.
inherently know the right way to burn um, bush to allow for regeneration to occur. Because
Right.
here in Western Australia, trees need to have fire to grow, which is really
Right.
interesting. I always look at trees as like, the trees here is like, wow, if they need fire, then I must need my pain to emerge into something bigger and better than where I am now, or to reconnect to who I once was
Right.
before.
So in some ways, the trauma, the human trauma, is like that fire.
Hmm.
Maybe we all need to connect with our trauma, and also acknowledge know other people's trauma too, like we were saying before.
Oh yeah.
Every person has trauma. Every person has had something that wounded them. Everyone, right?
Yeah. And it's also, I don't think there's any space to compare trauma, because if I am experiencing pain, then pain is valid, right? Just as if you're experiencing pain, it is valid, and
Right.
there's no
Right.
comparing that to one another. But if we can see that we all are experiencing it in different ways and it hurts, then we can heal together, right? So I think
Right.
it's to hold space for like to hear that, that other people also are needing space to heal.
Right. Probably everybody. In fact, the more angry someone is, the more hostile, probably the more unhealed trauma they have. And it could be something that they've never told anyone. Someone did something to them as a child, for example, and they never talked about it. And that's where the anger is coming from. And
And
they
that's why
yeah,
forgiveness and compassion are so
compassion. Yeah,
important. Forgiveness is not to say I condone this inappropriate behavior, but forgiveness actually helps our own healing. I forgive you for what you do not know. You know,
right,
I forgive myself for holding anger towards you.
right,
You know,
right,
I forgive myself for holding on to my own pain and being and at this point where I'm constantly in this cycle of pain. I
right,
forgive that, because then we can begin to shed.
right. And a lot of people, like, for example, we started to talk about Palestine and Israel, and it's horrible. They're re-traumatizing each other. One side throws rockets on the other, and all the children in Israel are hearing rockets. All the children in Gaza are hearing rockets. The children in West Bank are seeing police with guns. Everyone's being re-traumatized. They're all hurting each other, and everyone's got fear. And again, like you said, we have to have compassion that this other person is scared too, and they're my sister, my brother. Have to see that.
Yeah, yeah, we're all so deeply connected, much more than we really understand.
Right. Like we were saying before, we're all part of the tree of life,
Yeah,
and the human family, one human family that, you know, Palestinians and Jews are part of the tribes of Mesopotamia and Abraham several thousand years ago. But all human beings, we all came from Africa like 100,000 or 200,000 years ago. We're all one tree of life, you
yeah,
know? Yeah,
yeah. And I find that like with forgiveness, it's not necessarily like a verbal conversation that you need to have with the other person. I think it's like
yeah,
this like knowing like, okay, I forgive and now I'm free. I'm letting go. I'm cutting that cord of like feeling like I have to hold on to this anger because the other person doesn't understand. Um, and when we do that, then we just find that we're actually arguing over the same thing.
yeah.
And we all have the same inner desire, which is to be seen, to be loved.
Right, 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 right. And when you come from a place of quiet and peace, you see the other person differently.
Mm,
You don't see just their appearance, you know, white or black, Australian or Asian. You see a human being. We see a fellow soul, right?
yeah.
A fellow soul, a child of God, a child of the universe.
Mhm.
But that you can't see that way when you're caught in fear, right?
Yeah. And I know that from personal experience. It's not like speaking
Yeah,
from a book that I read. I've been on this journey for a very long time. And I
yeah,
can say for sure that when I am responding from the space of fear, I am blinded by it. I
right,
cannot see. I
right,
can't see beauty surrounding me. I can't see love. And
right,
that's why we have to transform our pain into love and our fear into love and into joy.
right,
um, yeah, it's the only way. You cannot have, and there is no resolution when you're being led by fear and
right.
pain. Yeah,
Right, you can't see. It's like being in a dark tunnel with no light. So
yeah,
you can't see a way out as long as you're in fear.
yeah. And I found
Um,
also that when I held on to pain and fear, which is valid, a lot of mine happened when I was very young as a child, and it was valid. Like I was neglected, by like my stepmother, and I had so much resentment towards her and so much anger, and but the resentment was only hurting me. The anger was only hurting me. I
right.
was literally hurting myself by holding on to these things. And I shared this, with the loss that I had last year, is like the more that I held on to my pain, the more that I was actually suffering.
Mm,
As soon as I released it, I could finally breathe for the first time.
right.
Mm,
So it's a balance though of acknowledging the pain,
yes.
but then at the same time to allow healing to happen. You can't touch it. You know, it's like you have to acknowledge what the trauma or the pain is,
Well,
but
yeah,
then don't keep hitting it and re-traumatizing, you know?
yeah. Well, how does a wound heal? Through love and care, right?
Right,
So you have to look at the wound in order to tend to it.
right,
But you is you pour love into it.
right, right. So we have to recognize everyone's wounds,
Mm.
but then after that, uh, pour love into the wounds, and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Everyone's got that. Yeah. All right, great, good wisdom here.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good, and also that the analogy of like being in a river, I think is also helpful. That fear and pain is like you're in a river drowning, and you can't help people in a river if you go into the river with them with all the fear and pain. You have to kind of stand on the side and throw out ropes. So we have to stand this standing on the side, holding on to trees, hold on to nature,
Yeah.
grounded, rooted. We can then help people, but once we start to feel too emotional, too upset, we then are going to be swept by the same currents and we can't help them. So like you said at the beginning, you have to start with yourself. you have
Yeah.
you have to be a source of love. What did you say? I'm going to say, you wrote it here, being the love. We have to be the love we want to see in the world, and that inspires others to do the same. Or don't look for love, be love. We have to be the love. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Uh,
It sounds very easy.
I don't know if it's easy, but yeah, no, it sounds simple. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's very challenging. So I'm
Yeah,
definitely needing the fact that this can take years for many people. It's
right,
taken me, I started my healing journey in 2012.
right.
So, and it took me probably like 5 years of like, really being in darkness and shedding to get
Yeah,
where I can say, yes, this is possible. Um, yeah. So I
right.
just want to share that because it's, we do have to talk
Yeah,
about the reality of it and the
yeah.
longevity of this journey.
Well, but though I would say any person who's listened this far to us talking has probably been doing well, and they're
Oh, yeah.
but they've been, if they're still listening to us, they're probably already been doing this for years. But the thing is, it's hard. It's hard to stay on this on the sides and not get sucked in,
Yeah.
because there's so much trauma and there's so much pain in the world. You get sucked in,
Oh,
and we can't do that if we want to be helpful, right? That's
yeah. And that's okay. You need to allow grace to
yeah,
arise. So sometimes you will fall in. I've fallen in.
yeah,
Um, but it is meditation that has helped me to see that and say, okay,
right,
just take a step back and ask yourself, how may I serve in a way that still serves my own inner needs as well? Like I can't be drowning and then trying to serve other people.
right, right, exactly.
Yeah.
You need the balance. All right, beautiful. Valerie, thank you. Wonderful talking to you and connecting with you. And it's so funny. It's just say it's interesting. We were saying at the beginning, um, my family roots are Jewish, came from, left the promised land like 2,000 years ago, moved all over Europe. We're kicked out of different places. They moved to New York, and now here I am in Japan. And you want to say where you're from? You've had a journey too, right?
Yeah, my family is from Nigeria in Imo State, so my parents are Igbo. And then they traveled to America. They had me, and then I moved here to Australia. I've lived in Indonesia and Bali, and back. Yeah, I definitely could not have imagined this journey.
Right, right, right. And it wasn't even possible. It wasn't even possible for our ancestors 100 years ago. It was
Right.
absolutely impossible to do, to be moving around the world
Oh
as you have.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
amazing. All right,
then
great talking to you. Let's do this again.
yes, definitely.
Okay, bye. I'm going to stop the recording.